Acids and carbonates. And I need my notes for this because I'm learning some of this here stuff. Says this. Oh, I got to turn further than that, Mr. Duke, in my notes. Rocks, believe it or not, contain a great deal of CO2. What's the fancy schmancy name for CO2? This is carbon dioxide. But not as a gas, like carbon dioxide usually exists, or as an ice, like carbon dioxide. Some dry ice is frozen carbon dioxide. They actually have it in the form of what are called carbonate ions. What are carbonate ions? This looks like a job for our pink reference sheet, the periodic table, and our yellow reference sheet, the one that had all of the pH stuff on it. So you might want to get those out. Or your other option is to memorize the periodic table. I've given you 2 songs. I've showed you that a 2-year-old was able to memorize the periodic table, so I don't see why you couldn't bother doing it. Have I got an extra pink sheet over? Look at the back, the polyatomic ions. I think somewhere on that list you'll find carbonate. What is carbonate's chemical formula? CO3. Carbon dioxide is CO2. So carbon dioxide is trapped inside of rocks along with an extra oxygen to form carbonate. But that can be broken up and eventually, later on, produce some CO2. Yeah? That's the charge on it. It's got a charge of -2. Okay? When acid rain, we talked last day about how acid rain forms. When acid rain falls on these rocks, the carbonate helps to, come here, neutralize the acid. And it releases CO2 in the process. This is one of the sources of greenhouse gases. Not a major one, a fairly minor one. But this actually, although you guys don't know it, has a huge impact on us here in BC. If you look at Canada, you can roughly, and I'm being very, very rough, divide Canada in half somewhere around Manitoba. And everything to the left of Manitoba, to the west, including us, most of the rocks here have lots of carbonate in them, which means that when acid rain falls, it hits those rocks, and the rocks neutralize the acid rain. This is why our lakes don't suffer as much from pollution. Out east in Ontario, one of its nicknames is the land of 1,000 lakes, or Minnesota, all those areas. They have all these small lakes, and a lot of them were dying off because of acid rain. And so what they actually had to manually do, and it's a government program, is they add carbonate, limestone, to these lakes to help neutralize the acid. Psst. Okay? So, big deal, Mr. Duick. Well, I want you to realize, Kenzie, that carbonate, putting that away, yes, is on your periodic table, and it's sort of CO2 in disguise. It's CO3. Hey, get rid of one of those oxygens through a chemical reaction, and suddenly, hey, you got CO2 sitting there. Sulfuric acid is one component of acid precipitation. The equation is, what's the first letter of this particular formula right here? What does that mean? If something starts with hydrogen, right now, what do we think it is? In all likelihood, in Science 10, it's going to be an acid. Eventually, there's way more possibilities, but we're keeping it simple in Science 10. You have to memorize that. Acids start with a hydrogen. What's SO4? That's on the back of your pink sheet as well. Sulfate. This is sulfuric acid, is the fancy name for it. Okay? It's used in batteries and a few other things as well. Plus, hey, what's this? What was CO3? We just looked at it. What did we call that one? And this is called calcium carbonate. So if I was telling you this to you in English, I would say, you know what? If you pour sulfuric acid onto calcium carbonate, you get, how would you say that? Calcium sulfide plus, hey, we all know what H2O is. Water plus, oh, and we now know what CO2 is. Carbon dioxide. So I said, rewrite this in English. I'm going to type because my handwriting is messy, but it's sulfuric acid plus calcium carbonate forms calcium, was it sulfide, sulfate, or sulfate? By the way, I grew up spelling sulfur with a PH, but I noticed it's a PH or an F. Depends on whether you're British or American, so you can use either or, which is why sometimes I spell sulfur with a PH and sometimes I spell it with an F. I'll try and get used to spelling with an F because I think that's what it is on your chart, yes? Yeah? Yeah. Anyways, sulfate plus water plus carbon dioxide. If you don't have carbonate in the rocks, you have nothing to neutralize the acid, in which case you get water and acid rain, you get acid lakes, and the wildlife starts dying off. Mr. Dirk, do we have to memorize or know this chemical reaction? No. In fact, you know what you absolutely positively need to know? What we're about to write here in this summary. Summary. Acid plus base. What did that give us? Do you remember? Salt plus water. Acid plus metal. Salt plus, if you can't remember this one, please remember the videos that I showed you at the end of the class and what happened with some of those metals when we dropped them in water, and that might be enough for you to remember what gas was produced. You saw explosions, yes? Remember those? Which gas explodes? There are several, but the first one on your periodic table, hydrogen gas. Oop. Acid plus carbonate gives a salt plus water plus carbon dioxide, CO2. And then we talked about oxides. We had metal oxides and non-metal oxides. First of all, what did it have to have in it for it to be an oxide? What did it end with? No, that's hydroxide. More simple than that. Oxide. Oh. Yeah, okay. We said, let's go look, Mr. Dewick. Let's go look. We had metal oxides and non-metal oxides. So metal oxide would be something like sodium oxide, calcium oxide. Non-metal oxides also ended in an H, but they did not begin with a metal. Here's what we said. Metal oxide plus water produces a basic solution. Non-metal oxide plus water produces acidic solution. And in fact, this is what gave us acid rain. Can I get this in line? There, that's better. That's more in line. Okay. And then I wrote assignment page 243 all. I don't know if I'm going to assign quite all of that. If you want to look in your textbooks at page 243. Let's see. You know what? This isn't bad. This is good review. So number 1 is fair game. 2, 3 is fair game. 4, 5 is fair game. 6 is fair game. We're gonna go like this. 1 to 6, we're gonna skip the Eastern Canada Lake's question. 8 is good, so we've skipped 7 so far. I'm not going to make you write out the questions. So for number 9, it just says state whether each of the following is an acid, a base, a salt, or none of these. What did we use as our abbreviation for an acid? Capital A for acid. What do we use as our abbreviation for base? Capital B. Salt, capital S, or none of these? How about none or N for none? Anyways, I think number 9 is good. 10 is good. Comma. You know what? I'm going to stop there. So instead of page 243, all. And I'm going to give you about 20 minutes. So right now I got 1:35 on my computer, on my watch. I'm going to give you till about 2 o'clock. And then we're going to have to pick up because I got to start organic chemistry. I'm not going to get through it all in one class. And I want to see if I can't give you Friday to be somewhat of a review period. This is also answering Kenzie's question about, Mr. Dewey, you're giving us a lot of homework. I'm hoping I can give you most of Friday, Kenzie, as a hey, get all your work done, catch-up period. I hope. Okay? So I'm going to go pause.